So, does anyone care to touch on this further?
But the kid even looks like Barron Trump. And let's think about this. Donald Trump has been in the limelight for 40 years. No one's even so much as mentioned that there's a book about a guy named Trump. I mean, he's the exact kind of person who would totally eat something like that up. He's had a son, Barron, for 13 years now. And still, for over a decade, no one's ever found this. I mean, think about it. If there was a book out there with your exact name in the title, you would definitely know about that. And
My name is Jerry. I left MAGA, and I'm here to explain something for you. By the way, this is me in post. I need to give you a warning. If you're on hallucinogenics or you need to take a break at any point in time during this video, you do that. If you're on hallucinogenics of any kind or hardcore mind altering substances, I suggest you come back when you're sober. There's some mental parkour going on here. I'll explain it later. I have a video that will explain for you much more deeply than any YouTube video will when it comes to Project Looking Glass, because Candace Owens subscribes to some QAnon stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to provide you with a QAnon based video, a little over an hour long, that's talking about Project Looking Glass, and it lays a bunch of stuff out. But part of the reason I want to bring this to you is not only to help you further understand the concept that is Project Looking Glass, the idea that is this conspiracy theory, Project Looking Glass, but I also want you to see how it's approached. Uh, QAnoners take it a lot deeper. But let's go ahead and check out this Candace Owens reference and see how she puts it.
Right? Awareness, just our being conscious of what they are doing, somehow spells their doom, which is bringing me to wanting to discuss today, as I promised you, the CIA's Looking Glass Project. Now, we briefly touched upon this at the end of last episode. Obviously, I'm a conspiracy girly, and I'm thrilled that we get to dive a little bit deeper on this topic for those of you that don't know.
Moving on, the episode.
All right, so that's all I'm going to share of that. I'm not going to provide a link. I just wanted you to hear the words falling out of her mouth. And I don't have a link for this because I don't remember where I got it. I probably found it on BitChute and downloaded it. But this is a QAnon compilation, and let's just roll right into it. Smokey, yeah, there goes my cat drifting through. Hit my arm. Okay, so right here, what I need to point out to you is this this number right here is where it falls in the sequence. This is called a drop, and drops are referred to as breadcrumbs. So we are talking directly to this board. So I don't know. This would have been on 4chan because it's January 2018. Interestingly enough, Moot, the CEO for uh, 4chan, I think this overlaps with the time that he was working on the board at Meta, or was working for Meta, Facebook, as a security consultant. And I'm pretty sure he was recruited by Peter Thiel. Okay, Peter Thiel was on the board at Meta slash Facebook up until 2021. Anyway, so they're talking directly to the board. Learn your comms. And there's Q down there. Learn your comms. Comms is making a reference, and I'm not going to do this for all these, but comms is a reference to communication channels. So uh, I have an example I'll show you at some point in the future of how comms work in the Q world. But this could also be like um, they might be one group might be using Telegram, another group might be using Element. There might be members. Another group might be using Signal. Somebody else is using Discord. Although I think a lot of them got kicked off of Discord. But yeah, they like to use these different platforms to gather, and then they'll run across their comms. when I was in the cult, at any given time, I had at least three different sets of social media chat platforms available to me. Discord was one I used the most. Um, and then DMs on alt-right platforms, direct messaging on Pilled or on what was that, Getter? And I didn't like Wimkin. It was way too radical for me. I'll have to cover all these alt platforms some other time. But let's get back to this because we're only 7 seconds in and there's a long way to go.
And if shifty shift, little shifty shift. It's got the little 10-inch neck. What size shirts
Okay, so pay attention to this number 10. Put a pin in that.
do you need out of? I wear a size 9. 9.
There it is.
He will not make the LSU football team, that I can tell you. Boom. And the neck is gone.
Oh, one more fun fact. Scientology has a real fixation with Alice in Wonderland as well. I'll bring you the crossover at some point.
The looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react with the people present.
I probably should have warned you, get your tinfoil hat. I meant to make one, but I'm immunized to this stuff. But yeah, this is wild.
So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. They are decommissioned. They are separated into their three components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to the both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be the appropriate one to make comment as to how they work. But there were field posts that were positioned around the actual gates, and they have been stored, I guess. I'm not certain what happened to the field components, but of the three components, they've actually been decommissioned, and liaisons to the European Union, the United Nations, and NATO are actually in possession of them. And there is no one group which has one of the other two components. It draws off from a natural ERB, an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Okay.
It accesses it and somehow works, from what I understand, not in parallel, but almost like piggybacks on the energy of the natural Stargate. They were usually worked in tandem. It required a second looking glass to be turned on at the same time to get acoustics or sound, if you will, from whatever the people were watching, but to go to piggyback in tandem with the visual response to the equipment. That it required two to be turned on to hear anything. The original device was the Stargate device. That was then increased in power, if you will, with the use of these field posts to stabilize the doorway, if you will, to step through into another location,
Right.
which, in essence, because distance and time are relative, the same thing, step two into another time. The looking glass device was a back-engineered Stargate.
It sounds like he's talking about Stargate SG-1, right? This is what I said a while ago when I was muted. Sorry.
Okay.
So it was actually back engineered from the original cylinder seal data, which
Right.
allowed us to produce the Stargate access devices, if you will, what we call the Stargates.
Okay, so cylinder seals. He's making reference to Syrian and Assyrian, and we're talking cuneiform society had cylinder seals for like engraving clay tablets with, so that you didn't have to write your name every time, or if it was kind of like a rubber stamp for the emperor's signature or something, or king's signature. So what he's trying to allege here is advanced technology from the past, which plays into a whole lot of other conspiracy theories like Atlantis. Anyway, moving on.
Hmm.
It's a back engineered device, the Looking Glass is. So the Looking Glass is a secondary device, and it was coming into its fore in the 60s and 70s. That's when they started actually being showing a lot of interest in actually building the equipment to be able to see over the curvature of time space, so that they could see into the future and somewhat into the past, but basically the future. The Looking Glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react.
Okay, hang on. I need to back that up just a little bit. Well, no, the cube would react to the individual. But it sounds to me like, when he's talking about the looking glass shows probabilities of the future, possibilities for the future. In other words, there's no better than a tarot reading, right? I don't, in case you didn't pick up from that, I don't believe in tarot readings. There was a time that I did, but no, not anymore.
With the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc out of the top of it, where the word yellow book originally came from.
Yeah.
And depending upon what predisposition, it's kind of like little Yoda telling young Luke, you bring in there what you have with you. Whatever is in there is what you bring. You could then change the perspective, the tilt, if you will, the orientation or angle of the information being presented back to you. So unless you are well prepared to deal with such a thing, human interaction and human emotions bring instability of the provenance of the information.
Kind of like a bad acid trip. It's going to happen if you go into the trip with a bad attitude or a wrong mindset.
The situations involving the treaties, their outcomes, the actual potential for both timeline number 1 and timeline number 2 outcomes. In the case that we're in right now, we seem to be in a variant of timeline 1, and that's good. For everything that I've seen and have read and reported to me concerning timeline number 1, it's not happening exactly the way that they figured that it would. But then again, it couldn't, because we've made changes along the way, which diverted us away from timeline number 2. And in so doing, our future, again, I regard our future as something which is pretty much a blank slate. We're writing it for ourselves. And so we are now seeing something coming to pass which is slightly different than the prognostication, than the probabilities that we were seeing. It has been used since actually the 50s by the potentates, by the leaders of the various countries, to skew the history
Wow, that's amazing.
of the human race.
Right.
And the common folk, the average people, all of us, have a right to a future which is our own, and not being skewed and designated and promulgated and promoted and provoked by blue bloods who feel that they are above everyone else. The cube was actually
Oh, you mean like Peter Thiel and Donald Trump?
the information about the cube, its existence, was known as of 1946. It was further discussed in 1947 after a certain crash in midwestern, lower southwestern state, New Mexico, and following which, during the first brokering for treaties by the Orions with Eisenhower, the cube was handed to Eisenhower. It was, in fact, expected to go to the United Nations authorities, and it was, in fact, spirited away by the United States military.
And a
Okay, so that was an Eben reference. Extraterrestrial biological life. Anyway, uh, extraterrestrial biological entity, Eben. They're talking about aliens and from Orion, I guess. I forget all of it. But apparently they landed a UFO on the White House lawn and struck this deal with JFK and gave him this tool. And like you heard the guy say, the military spirited it off like they do everything else, just like that crash in Roswell. That's what he was alluding to. It was a weather balloon of sorts. It was a test device. Anyway, back to this.
looking glass is not the same as a Stargate.
No, a looking glass is a back-engineered form from the original cylinder seal descriptions on how to build the units that they made Stargate. So in essence, you could take a looking glass
Yes.
unit and make a couple changes to the equipment,
Okay.
lift it up on an angle,
Okay.
put field posts around it, and open up a hole to step through.
Sure. Okay, but the looking glass can show you the
Wait until you see the drawings later of what they're proposing on these energy posts.
future. So are we saying
Future
that there were-
probabilities, not the future.
This is Dan Burrish. Now, what we just watched is from a 2-hour interview that he did with Project Camelot back in 2007 about the looking glass technology. Now,
Oh, okay. Project Camelot was supposed to bring out this UFO disclosure project, which is what Disclosure 2024 was supposed to be, and then it was supposed to be this Disclosure 2025 was supposed to. It kind of turned out about right that it was supposed to be exposing the global elite since Trump was in power. Anyway, that hasn't aged as well. But yeah, Disclosure 2024 was the most recent variation of the UFO Disclosure Project, which has supposedly been going on. Anyway, I'm just going to let this guy talk.
with accounts like this, I always try to remind myself of one thing. All major advances in technology at one time seemed like laughable fantasy. The thought of electricity and a light pole lighting up instantly would have seemed like heretical magic not even 200 years ago. The idea of traveling through the sky at 10 times the speed of a horse, or in the case of the Concorde, 25 times, would have probably got you locked up in the Middle Ages and so on. So while some of these stories these whistleblowers tell in these depositions can get a bit wild, in my opinion anyway, I don't let them distract me from the core information. So what I did here is I went through this interview and I isolated all the direct info about this tech, because no matter where these people's stories go, it does seem to me like they're all referencing the same technology, or at least variations of it. Now I'll play the rest of this, and then I'll show you another account of what I believe to be the same technology, finishing with my own breakdown on whether or not I even believe time travel is feasible, and then my overall thoughts.
The position of the rings, their orientation, the energy running through them, position of the barrel, etc. Because you can raise the barrel up on an armature inside the center of it. All come into play as if you have an onion with the various layers of the onion. As you move through the different energy levels, you also move through the different layers, so you get different bits of information. Now imagine an almost infinite number of layers overlain in comparison to the positions of the rings, an almost infinite amount of energy that you can add or subtract. Tuning it up, tuning it down.
Well, it sounds
Instead of going up by 1 hertz or by 2 hertz, maybe by a thousandth of a hertz, up and
Okay,
down.
you
The
close
technology is
down-
not being used at all right now.
Okay, but the reason it's not used now is because of where we're going into the galactic, the plane of the.
As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment will probably all get reassembled, yeah.
Turned back on.
Oh, sure.
2017. That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
Oh, not until then.
Probably.
Um, this is where this goes back to that whole concept that the true believers, the true Trump believers, buy into this Trump plays 5D chess. It's because he's got this help, allegedly.
Probably not.
But I wouldn't say that that's the case. Let me back that up a few seconds.
Plane of the
As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment will probably all get reassembled, yeah.
turned back on.
Oh, sure.
2017? That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
Oh, not until then.
Probably not. The so-called cycle of catastrophe or season of catastrophe of Falconelli, the time period from, right around 1992 to right around 2012, right around that area. While we will have passed 2012, we really ought to get through the entire cycle, which is about 1980 to about 2016, to feel confident that the interpretation from the timeline from the future about their own catastrophe is not off by a few years. We're talking about 45,000 years or 52,000 years respectively. We have difficulty understanding what happened 2,000 years ago. And we're talking about 50,000 years here. So it's very wise for them to wait.
The looking glasses are now decommissioned, but also the Stargate technology.
Yeah, they're decommissioned, and the Stargates and the looking glasses, I'm sure they're all in their little mothballed containers and all of that, and they have been separated. The three components of each have been separated and moved to different power structures, diplomatic and military authorities in the world. And we're talking about the EU specifically, the UN and NATO. Those are in specific control of one of the three components each.
Okay, so basically what I gathered from this is that there's a floor in one of the facilities in Area 51 called Alice's Floor, and that it has a stuffed white rabbit permanently mounted above the entrance to the Project Looking Glass room. On this floor in Area 51 exists a jump room, which utilizes an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a Stargate, and a looking glass device. Now, he also spoke of a yellow cube which was given to us by the Orions, which seems to work also like the looking glass in that it shows future probable timelines. This floor is the second level of Building 4, or Level 4-2, which I find particularly interesting because famously, in the 1979 novel A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, at the end, spoiler alert, the answer to life, universe, and everything around it stated to be 42. Obviously, it's a joke, a nonsensical, simplistic answer to the most complex question in the history of time. But yet, here's supposedly a floor in Area 51 that has figured out how to allow people to traverse time as they would the other three dimensions. And the floor is 4-2. 42. So maybe a little Easter egg there by Mr. Douglas Adams, depending on how in the know he was. But
Okay, so Douglas Adams wasn't talking about time travel. He wasn't talking about space travel. He wasn't talking about anything like that. 42, as referenced in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is in reference the uh, to the ASCII computer code. And in ASCII, 42 is the input code for the output of the asterisk. And in literature, the asterisk just means you continue it. So the answer to what is life or what is the purpose of life or what is the universe, 42. It's up to you. Anyway, sometimes you'll see these guys try to just like really reach for connections to validate their thought patterns.
from what I can tell from listening to many testimonies from different people is that the descriptions of the devices and how they work all seem to be pretty steady. So it does in fact seem like they exist. Now Dan states that the main three components of these were all split up to keep whoever would seek to use them in check. But what if those weren't the only devices? Now what if someone else had cracked the code? He claims that the looking glass was reverse engineered from the Sumerian cylinder seals and that they were first introduced to this tech after recovering it from a downed UFO in the 40s. But that
I buckle up.
might not be the entire story. In 2004, Washington lawyer Andrew Basiago had come out and claimed that from 68 to 72 he was involved in a DARPA-run project that was using tech which they had developed from going over Nikola Tesla's schematics after he had died. Now, he stated that this tech was being used to move between different periods of time, and that from the ages 7 to 12, he was part of an operation named Project Pegasus. Now, this is especially interesting to me because it was Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, who was brought in to go over Tesla's work after he had passed in 43. And Trump
Okay, okay. That much is fact. The other guy that he just introduced, the creator of this video, just introduced, we're going to hear parts of his story. And oh my goodness. Anyway, um, it's kind of wild. I'm just warning you. You thought the other guy's story was crazy? Folks, the conspiracy theory community is full of these individuals who've had unique lives, to say the very least.
Trump's uncle John was an American electrical engineer, an inventor, a physicist, and a professor at MIT. So this is one of the rare people who actually knew what he was looking at when going over these notes. Now, it's also worth noting that John Trump and Julian Assange look nearly identical. Make what you want of that.
Yeah, yeah, they do that a lot. Make what you want of that. Do your own research. Trust me, bro. These are thought stopping phrases that are very common within the QAnon and the Q adjacent communities.
But back to Bishago. Here's what he has to say.
The use of that device as a teleportation device was accidentally discovered when they constructed a model of one of the drawings that was in Nikola Tesla's papers upon his death in 1943. And it just said Tesla energetic array, or energetic array in his original documents. And they didn't know at first that it was a teleportation device, a teleporter. They set it up there in that room.
Uh, 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 hold that thought. No, just I'm saying put a pin in it.
In Curtis Wright. And what I was told is that a technician walked through the energy field to retrieve a screwdriver on a workbench in the lab, and he suddenly disappeared, so that his supervisor thought he had been disintegrated by this Tesla device. 6 weeks or 6 months later, he shows up at the door of the facility, of that very lab, and his supervisor collapses, literally collapses, believing that he's come back from the dead, or grateful that he didn't die in the development of this Tesla device, the construction of this Tesla device. And then he told the tale of how he fell through a tunnel, apparently in the time-space continuum, and popped out in Africa, where he was virtually deified by the local tribe that he had teleported to, until he explained that, no, I'm just an ordinary human being. He tried to communicate to them that in a way in which they would take him to the national government, he would be able to get home, and he did. And it was either 6 weeks or 6 months. I think it was 6 weeks. But that's in fact the story we were told in our training. So they realized that this Tesla device, in Tesla's original papers, that had actually been seized by the War Department, kept in the National Archives under the Alien Property Act in '44, and then forwarded to Los Alamos when the Manhattan Project physicists began gathering there to build the atomic bomb. They thought, well, let's send Tesla's paperwork to the physicists in the world who can make the most sense of them. So ultimately they were sent to Los Alamos when the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory was being started to build the atomic bomb, and that's where they remain to this day. Project Pegasus, quote unquote, owed its greatest debt of gratitude to Nikola Tesla. We did use some reverse engineering from downed extraterrestrial craft. We were given some technology by the ET groups that we were in liaison with during these years. But there's no question that time travel is the accomplishment of our species in this planetary context. It did not.
So are you noticing that both of these guys make reference to extraterrestrial entities and advanced technology, but they're also referencing it back that they found evidence of it in ancient times. They're for one, not only are they being hyperbolic in their stories, just spinning quite the yarn. I mean, I would expect to find this sort of thing in a Hollywood movie. But I've met some individuals. I met one guy that's online. We never met in person. That tried to claim that series, The Island, was based on his life. Anyway,
It wasn't all reverse engineered. In the front of the room were two gray parenthesis-shaped objects that looked sort of just like if you put your fingers like this, sort of like, you know, closing parentheses. They were built into their bases, kind of like high-end stereo speakers, and they were about 8 feet high and about 10 feet apart on the floor of the lab there. And on the left boom, there was a technician sitting at a video console with a keyboard. And on the right side, the boom was plugged into a power outlet on the wall that was about the size of the power you would need to power a small-sized industrial piece of equipment, like an industrial lathe or drill press. And my dad had the technician turn on the device. And what I saw was essentially energy that was radiating between the two booms of the device, like water falling in a public sculpture. And then my dad had me go up towards the device, and it looked like raster on a TV set. And there were little squiggles at 3-inch intervals coming out of portals of light, sort of light lime green portals of light. So there were these bluish-green squiggles that were swimming across the field of raster, kind of like tiny little tadpoles. And my dad explained that we were going to step back, and on the count of 3, he's going to hold my hand, and we were going to jump through that field of energy. So we practiced it a couple times, and then on the third try, we leapt through the field of energy, and we immediately found ourselves in a bluish-white tunnel of light, and moving forward at a very rapid rate of speed, but also in a way where you perceived that we weren't moving at all. And as my father had stated, we might get separated during the jump, and in fact, he was sort of sucked through the wall as the tunnel began to fragment and compartmentalize as we got to our destination. And as my dad had described, we would find ourselves on a hillside somewhere else in the United States, and that hillside ended up being the state capitol complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was one of 140 gifted and talented American school children who were enrolled in Project Pegasus. Some of the time travel devices required the involvement of children, and I'll explain that later in my lecture. But that's from...
there's a video that I'm going to link in the description. Weird Reads by Emily, and she did a deep dive on the Montauk Project, which also allegedly used children. There's a lot of these. There's a lot of these conspiracy theory projects utilize kids, and this is somehow a way that the government hides dark projects, because not all missing kids are missing kids, or something to that effect.
Two sources many years removed that stated it was 14 groups of 10 children, and each of the groups was indicated by a color. The first child teleportees were Latin American orphans, literally homeless kids. And so my dad said, so you, and I said, well, who was the next? He said, you were. Remember I took you up to Curtis Wright, and we jumped and met with Dr. Agnew at the labs? And I said, oh, so that means I was the first American kid to teleport. He said, yes. So that was sort of the beginning of the involvement of kids in teleportation. That the very Manhattan Project physicists who gave us the...
And I also found that a little disconcerting, that they were testing the systems with kids. I mean, obviously, he told the story about his dad jumping through, but he was the first American kid to go through. It just seems kind of weird that kids would be being involved in such potentially dangerous uh, scientific projects that would be so secret from the government. What if those kids don't make it?
Atomic bomb, a weapon of mass destruction, I think a very negative thing for that reason, also gave us a very beneficial set of technologies, and those are teleportation, Tesla teleportation, and other time travel devices and methodologies. One of the major things they did with their intelligence findings from time travel is brief future presidents of their destinies, beginning roughly with Jimmy Carter. Project Pegasus was carried out under the aegis of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. When I was enrolled, it was ARPA. Project Pegasus, at the time that I joined it in 1969, was not primarily a time travel project. It was an intelligence program for the CIA. So by 1970, when the 8 methodologies that I'm going to describe today had been derived, Project Pegasus existed primarily to perform remote sensing in time of past and future events to aid the U.S. government in contingency planning for future events.
Okay, that's one of the other definitions of Project Stargate is remote viewing. And that's why I have an episode coming up about Major Ed Dames with Art Bell, because this all fits together on how these people ended up drinking so much Kool-Aid.
In addition to
QAnoners, that is, and the hardcore Trump supporters. People are wondering, how do they fall for this? It's because their brains are pumped, many of them, their brains are pumped full of this stuff. Like Candace Owens.
time travel being captured by the military during World War II, it is also, it's true to say that it has also been captured by the Central Intelligence Agency, which I don't think has a very high reputation for proper conduct around the world. You know, assassinating foreign leaders, advising the military to invade sovereign countries, and you know, throwing elections and so forth, and also undermining the civil liberties of Americans and foreign nationals. But I'm proud of my dad, and I think you can say that he was a white hat inside the intelligence community because, among other things, he was actively urging the public adoption, you know, the declassification and deployment of Tesla teleportation for civilian.
In and out.
Oops. Oh, snikes. I need to get back over here. Let's see. Oops, I went too far. Too far. I did not mean to click the line. I meant to click pause. I was trying to stop on the Q stuff. Ah, there it is. All right. Sorry about jumping all over the place like that. Accidents happen. So, what I want to point out here is this declass it all. That's declassify everything. What they do not anticipate is POTUS to declass it all due to optics. And then race for time. Slowly and carefully stop after each sentence. Analyze, understand significance, reread, continue, appoint. So appointment of second Supreme Court would fail. Think wise, sit tight. Anyway, as we move forward, when you see those, if you want, go ahead and stop and read them. You can pause. If you have any questions about them, drop or about any of this, go ahead and drop them in the comments.
When he had that heart attack at age 53 at his desk at Parsons, was it just because of where his health was, or was it a hit? Because my dad was somewhat of a dissident voice within Project Pegasus, and I think he was a moral arbiter in that sense, and I'm proud of him.
Okay, so that's that. He's hinting there, or there. He's hinting back to the Church Commission and how during the Church Commission it was unveiled that the CIA has a pneumatic pistol that would shoot a projectile that would induce a heart attack.
He also had worked at an elite think tank called the Thomas A. Edison Research Labs in West Orange, New Jersey, that were literally physically next door to the historical Edison Labs. There was just one doorway that was always locked that divided the Edison Labs that Hillary Clinton rescued as First Lady and turned into a national historical site and saved over 1 million papers of Edison and his staff as First Lady. She's never credited for that, but it was a great thing for the country. What I'm saying is that Edison's labs were lying fallow for 50 years until Hillary Clinton saved them and made them a national historical monument. At the Edison labs, my dad did something very conspicuous, which he informed me about when I was a kid on the project, which is he repeated Nikola Tesla's teleportation experiments that Tesla had first begun during his famous stay at Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899. After the first time I did Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie in November 2009, I received.
Okay. So George Norrie took over for Art Bell after Art Bell left Pahrump, Arizona, which you may know from the Mars Invades movie. But yeah, Art Bell gave up his show, and by that time he was already divorced. But he moved to the Philippines and married a 16-year-old girl. But George Norrie, I guess, is based here in St. Louis. I don't know. That's what I heard. It'd be interesting to have a conversation with him, maybe. But yeah. Anyway, that's Art Bell gave the world Alex Jones. Art Bell is what pulled me into the conspiracy theory world even deeper than I already was. And it was a point of bonding with my dad. But I made it out of the MAGA cult. He's still in there.
I received an email from a man who actually showed me with attachments that he had grown up in Montclair, New Jersey. And he described how in 1956 on the streets of Montclair he found a 1958 penny. And so I said, well, that was probably one of the pennies that my dad talked about dropping through a magnetized cylinder, repeating one of Tesla's experiments. My dad and basically his lifelong or career-long supervising engineer and friend who had introduced him to his wife and so forth, they started filling in all these technical blanks for me, and my dad started talking about how at the Edison labs he was magnetizing cylinders like Tesla had and doing things like dropping pennies through them, dropping chalk.
Okay, so magnetized steel does not have an effect on the chalk like he's talking about. But if you drop a copper cylinder, or yeah, anyway, it doesn't teleport. The copper sliding through the magnetized tube is going to move through slowly.
Billiard chalks and so forth, and kind of like the one that we were using for our cues playing bumper hole. And here I have somebody who found one of those pennies on the streets of Montclair. So presumably sometime after 1958, and during those 8 years, certainly after 1956, my dad dropped a penny through one of those Tesla cylinders, and this young person, found it on the streets of his hometown of Montclair. So that also qualified him as an American engineer who would be brought up as a technical consultant on Tesla teleportation, because he had recapitulated Tesla's experiments during his stay at the Edison labs. This is another important figure in the development of time travel. This is Father Pellegrino Ernetti of the Order of St. Benedict. All of the children that I was with in Morris Plains, New Jersey, all 10 of us, were going to Sunday school at the local Benedictine parish. The Benedictines, of course, are the famous Black Friars. Some of you conspiracy aficionados will remember the controversy involving the Vatican Bank, involving the hanging at Blackfriars Bridge in London, and the involvement of the Benedictines in that Vatican Bank scandal. Well, if some of them are developing time travel devices for the U.S., or at least passing their findings along, at some point they have to be paid, right? And the Vatican is, like the Queen of England, owns 25% of the land, the real estate of the world. And so, I'm getting off track, but in any case, Father Ernetti was doing some research with another Benedictine priest, a priest by the name of Agostino Gemelli. These two Vatican priests were doing research at the Catholic University of Milan in northern Italy in the 1940s. They were studying the harmonic patterns in Gregorian chants because they wanted to know why Gregorian chants have specialized properties, like the ability to heal people physically, to center people spiritually, to cause people to go into trance states and so forth. And they were making a little improvement or a little change in a small microphone. And suddenly something that his partner Gemelli's, I still don't have a picture of Father Gemelli, but something that Father Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the microphone. He heard his father's voice calling him in Italian. I don't know what it is. It's my little zucchini. Is zucchini the Italian word?
Zucchini, yes.
Yeah, so that's the Italian name for that vegetable. But that was his name for his little, zucchini and the little sprite, his young son. And so they're standing there, and then Ernetti said to Gemelli, "What was that?" He says, "It was my father. He was calling me his little zucchini." And so they realized they had developed essentially a window to the past. They had found a way to capture the residual sound signal of a past event. One apparently adhering some way to Father Gemelli, his aura or whatever, or in his mind. triggering maybe a memory or something like that. And they ultimately partnered with the world's leading physicist of that era, the great Enrico Fermi, who did research in Italy, then also at the University of Chicago during the war. And they developed.
And Fermi is who the Fermi Labs in Chicago are named for, including the collider that they have there. That tidbit's going to play into fact later.
Developed by 1952 a flat screen, basically something like in the nature of a television screen, in which a past event was being shown. Gemelli
It's called the chronovisor.
Ernetti rather used it to prove and to derive and show the world a missing stanza, historically missing stanza from a Roman play. And he also insisted until his death in 1994, as a very respected Catholic prelate, that they had also captured images of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. I think Fermi is probably the central figure in the hidden history of time travel because he partnered with Ernetti and Gemelli on the improvement, the development of the chronovisor, this holographic looking glass technology to see and then ultimately send people to the past or future. And he was the mentor of Harold Agnew, the federal science director, and sort of the overseer of the teleportation stuff centered in New Mexico when we were on Project Pegasus. So Fermi apparently has this covert connection to both the derivation of teleportation and chronovision. What does a chronovized event or experience to the past involve? It doesn't go back and put you where you're examining what happened when the kid shot the gun. It takes you back in time to the kid shooting the gun. So the past has to exist. We have to live in a time-space continuum for the chronovisor probes that I was on to even have been possible. And Fermi definitely believed that the past still exists. So somewhere in the complex formula behind him on the chalkboard is ultimately a formula that squares the circle and completes the fact that the past, present, and future exist simultaneously, and you can visit both simply by going.
Okay, so there's a lot there, and that's just parts of a 6-hour speech that he gave back in 2013. But a couple things that stood out to me watching that lecture is that he had stated that children handled the stress of the jump better than adults, and that was the reason that they were being used to test it. And that they used this technology developed from Tesla's own schematics to bend the space-time continuum, which basically goes like this. Now, Einstein, in his theory of relativity, he added a fourth dimension. You have in, out, left, right, up, down. But he stated that without the fourth dimension of time, it was incomplete. Basically saying this: I can tell you to meet me at the station and give you an address, but unless I give you a time, that information's useless. Meet me when?
See, right there, he went off the rails. The third dimension is time, as I understand it. I mean, we live in a three-dimensional environment, and it exists on a timeline that is not a fourth dimension. Especially if you're gonna be listening to other conspiracy theorists that are talking about Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, and oh, good grief! I think I've got a video on that one too. Or uh, not Bigfoot being an interdimensional being, but about interdimensional beings.
Thus was created the space-time continuum, and as the theory goes, by bending it, essentially folding it like a piece of paper, you could create shortcuts to different eras of time. This is what's
That's right.
referred to as a traversable wormhole or an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Now, Bashar.
No. See, he's right there. He's jumping to conclusions again because it's not you can't, the Einstein-Rosen bridge concept, if expanded large enough with enough energy to keep it stable, as generally described in science fiction, then yeah, theoretically you can travel from one place to another. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with time. And no, it's not called a traversable wormhole. So he's jumping to things.
Chicago states that this was achieved by accessing radiant energy using a device made up of two booms 8 feet tall and 10 feet apart. States that his father had been working at Edison Labs when he recreated one of the Tesla devices and dropped a penny through to the past. A lab which, as he puts it, was saved by Hillary Clinton. Now, why was she so concerned with this lab? Were they procuring some of this information? Now, this leads me to the they never thought she'd lose. Listen to what.
Okay. So remember the yellow cube. When I was in these conspiracy circles, we were talking about Hillary having a brown cube, and I don't remember there being a brown cube mentioned in here when I reviewed this material earlier. But yeah, let's go ahead and go.
What ex-Navy SEAL Bill Wood claims to have worked with his looking glass device had to say.
One of the last predictions put out by the Yellow Cube was that, for all intents and purposes, and this is just my level of understanding, is that Hillary Clinton would be president in 2012. When the Yellow Cube is involved, it leads me to question what I know about looking glass and string theory along with that. The
Oh yeah, and string theory.
first question that anybody that knew anything about the process would know is who was using the cube
Right.
when it made that prediction. If I knew that, then I could tell you why it would predict what it predicted.
So he's saying that they had seen Hillary winning. Now, he states 2012, but something a lot of these different accounts I've been going through have really alluded to is that the future is sort of in motion, and with time not being linear and dates being hard to pinpoint. So I think it's entirely possible that Hillary knew she was going to win the 2016 election. And I would even put this post up as proof. Happy birthday to this future president. I don't care how confident you are about winning. No one posts that, especially not on something of this magnitude. Literally an election to run the world. I mean, that's like punching karma in the face and not giving a
Okay, never mind.
speech that night. She was too certain of victory, okay? Let's be honest here. Something was weird there. Now, all this
Oh, she was too confident. So something, so something was off.
aside, the one problem I run into with a lot of these accounts is that they all get a little weird at times. Like, for example, Al Bielek, who has a compelling story of being part of the Philadelphia experiment and being thrust first to 2137, and then he was sent to 2749. And watching him, he really does seem to be speaking from memory. I believe that he believes what he's saying, and I'm not.
Okay, so that's key wording right there. I truly believe he believes what he is saying. That's psychology speak. When somebody has a fully developed delusion or they have a misperception on something or they're utilizing some sort of thought filtering process that distorts their perception of things. Um, and that could be due to dissociation, uh, any number of things. But I truly believe he believes what he's saying. Does not validate that the guy is telling the truth. He's just telling what he believes. Anyway,
Saying that it's wrong, but there's certain things, like at one point he mentions wondering about NASA while in the future, which would have been impossible because the Philadelphia experiment allegedly happened in 43 and NASA hadn't even existed yet. So now he also
but you're skipping over the fact that he jumped to the future and then jumped again. So, and there's actually there's actually a variation on this story that he popped up in 84 and then 2024, I think it was. I shoot fire. I don't remember now. It's been a while.
at one point speaks about working on the Montauk project, which was in 1984. So he possibly could have been getting those years mixed up. And I also think it's possible that these experiments could be leaving wear and tear on their minds. I mean, you're talking about experimenting with the human psyche. And, so I think this could be maybe muddying their memories as well. But now the Montauk,
Like MK Ultra did, utilizing uh, drugs and all kinds of crazy things, trying to manufacture mind control.
Project was exactly that. Now, this was also a project that was using tech found in one of these downed spacecrafts from the 40s, which was a chair that when they
It always goes back to the aliens.
sat in this chair, they found it amplified their consciousness, basically letting them project it out of their body. But now going back to Burrish, he had talked about the government being handed some of this tech by a race of beings from Orion. And you have Bishago, who talks about DARPA having him use psychic projection, also with the Montauk chair, to observe the building which John McCain was being held captive in. So while I think it's good to have an open mind with these things, I think it's also good to have a healthy skepticism at times. But all wild stories aside, and again, something that does seem consistent with these accounts, they all seem to be talking about real devices. And just look at the Q drops alone. There have been a huge amount of instances where future-proof past. I mean, 1 year to the day it says future-proof past, watch the wives. Sure enough, here's Bush Sr.'s funeral with all the wives of the most prominent political figures of the last 40 years getting cards followed by looks of horror. Now, they could have set that up, but what were the odds that there would be an event with all those people in the same place on that very day with cameras in front of them where this could even be set up? Or
It was a funeral of state, for crying out loud.
right before 8chan was taken down, Q posted 93 DK. And then, by the time Akun, after a lot of problems getting started, finally was brought back up, allowing Q to make his first post back exactly 93 days later, 93 dark. And those are just two of dozens. I mean, it's almost unreal at this point. 11/11/18, America will be unified again. Now, we all thought it's going to be a Veterans Day parade until
Uh, 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 Look again. Okay. Look real close. All right. I'm giving you an Easter egg here.
Q posted that timelines change. But now, if you look at it again, you'll notice that there's a dot after the 18.
Did you catch that?
A year later, once Akun is up and running and everyone is united again, people find that it's being run through the DoD server with the address 11/11/18. I mean, they almost have to have one of these devices. And again, President Trump's uncle is the person who went through Nikola Tesla's life work. He was an electrical engineer and a physicist. So this is one of the rare people on this planet who could actually understand what he was reading. And here you have Andrew Bishago stating that these looking glasses and time devices were mostly derived from Nikola Tesla's own schematics.
Okay. That's a Tesla coil. It's different than what we typically see on YouTube videos and such, but that's a Tesla coil.
Is this what Q means when he repeatedly tells us you have more than you know and X out POTUS is always 5 steps ahead? Is it because they now have access to Alice's floor in Area 51 and that they have their own looking glass and their own booms to create time dilation energy fields? I mean, there is a book from the late 1800s called Little Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey that starts off by claiming it's based on a real person who's guided by the masters of all masters, a man named Don, well, a man with the title of Don, but the kid even looks like Baron Trump. And let's think about this. Donald Trump has been in the limelight for 40 years. No one's even so much as mentioned that there's a book about a guy named Trump. I mean, he's the exact kind of person who would totally eat something like that up. He's had a son, Baron, for 13 years now, and still, for over a decade, no one's ever found this? I mean, think about it. If there was a book out there with your exact name in the title, you would definitely know about that. And nothing until 2017, when the real Baron Trump was just around the age of the character in the book. So was this book just found because it was just written? And what even gets more eerie is Lockwood's third novel. That's right, the first two are about Baron Trump. The Last President, which begins with a scene from a panicked New York City in early November describing a state of uproar after the election of an enormously opposed outsider candidate. Remember the marches down Times Square? And it goes on, the mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists. It says that the Fifth Avenue Hotel will be the first to feel the fury of the mob, and that's exactly where the Trump Tower is.
Protesters gathered in Philadelphia, Seattle, Boston, Portland, Oakland, California, Chicago, and New York tonight. The protest in New York has made its way to Trump Tower, where a large crowd has gathered.
Now here, let's look at the most popular review on Amazon. It states that in the book, Congress dissolves the presidency because he meddled in their greed and fights against their business dealings with the money changers, that he's a good guy with a direct approach against corruption and racism, and is loved by the people, although he wasn't popular at first. And then it states that it becomes vague at the end. Is that because the end is yet to happen? And again, listen, this is just some what-if video, just a chance for us to suspend disbelief.
Just a chance for us to suspend disbelief. Just asking questions, bro.
And actually consider the possibility of the existence of these devices and the increasingly plausible idea that they're being used right now by opposing factions. One who has ruled over us for centuries, if not millennia, and the other who is trying to bring us on board. And next, I want to take a closer look at the two more fantastic parts of Burish and Bashago's account.
Okay, so he's making reference to the evil cabal, the globalists, the the royal families, the what is it, 13 bloodlines? Anyway, it's a bunch of othering rhetoric.
Counts. Then I'll give my own thoughts on time travel and the possible effects of time travel. Here's Bashago talking about being able to separate the conscience from the body.
Another thing that we were doing was we were being physically spun. If you put somebody on a tabletop-like device in a sort of classic Da Vinci Vitruvian man kind of body position, but with their head at the center of the circle, and to have them look up at a spiral image on the ceiling while they're being spun clockwise 33 rotations per minute, you can train them to literally go out of body, and that's what they were doing. And
That sounds like the whirling dervishes. I could be wrong, but the whirling dervishes being, I think they're a Sufi sect, or maybe the Sufis are different, but they do a similar thing. I'm a little confused on that at the moment. But the Sufis, they're the whirling dervishes rather. They do that spinning dance and reach a religious euphoria and gain enlightenment. And I guess a message. I really don't. I really haven't dug that deeply into the whirling dervishes any deeper than what I just said.
And when we were out of body, we would then go through astral realms, and then when we come back into our body, we would then be interviewed by one of the ladies from DARPA.
Now, there's a lot of symbolism in this clip I found, like the spiral here, which we know is a pedo symbol. His mention of the 33. Is this his way of letting them know that he's one of them? Or is this the origin of the symbols? Is this why the 33 is so widely used? Is this why they use the swirl? And he said they use mostly children, Central and South American children. Could this be also part of why the wall means more than we know?
Okay, I don't know if you recognize that approach. I don't know if you ever watched Ancient Aliens, but is it possible? We find the evidence highly compelling.
But going back to what he said about being able to separate the conscience from the body, this goes along with something Donald Marshall had claimed when he was talking about the cloning centers in Canada, that they were growing these full-grown human clones
Oh my goodness.
and then using a device to separate the conscience and then transferring it to the newly grown body. And he claims they've been able to clone people since right after World War II, which I find quite interesting that almost everything seems to go back to the late 40s and 50s. It is theorized that the Montauk chair was achieving these astral projections by accessing the subject's pineal gland. Now, fluoride is said to calcify the pineal gland. When did they start putting fluoride in the water? You guessed it, the late 40s.
And that's another. I'm gonna have. I really should take this video apart and break down each conspiracy theory that he references, so that you can have a fully comprehensive understanding of what's going on here.
But now let's go on the Burrish's claims of beings coming from Orion and giving us some of these technologies and even having treaties with many of the world's powers. That claim might not be as wild as it sounds. There are actually many ancient cultures who claim to have been visited by beings who came from the stars, like the Dogon tribe from West Africa who claimed that beings from the star Sirius had visited them long ago. This tribe even had knowledge of Saturn's rings and Jupiter's moons and things they could have never known about. I mean, there's a 4,500-year-old Sumerian carving that depicts the sun with 8 planets around it, the same size as ours, with one that even has a ring. I mean, this is thousands of years before we knew we orbited the sun. The Mayans claimed their gods had come down from the Pleiades star constellation, which is in line with Orion's belt, and in line with it on the other side is Sirius, which, along with the Dogon tribe, the ancient Egyptians believed their gods had come from. You have Osiris, who comes from Orion. You have Isis, who comes from Sirius. Ancient Hindu literature speaks of air battles between flying craft they called Vimana. I mean, where did they get this technology? And that's not all. The Vedic texts, amongst other writings from ancient India, are a wealth of knowledge. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger regularly read the Vedic texts. Heisenberg even stated that quantum theory will not look as ridiculous to people who have read the Vedanta. The Vedanta is the conclusion of Vedic thought. And Schrödinger was
They're leaning really heavy into some white supremacy ideologies. Um, he's going to get to it here in a moment.
quoted as saying that the unity and continuity of the Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This is entirely consistent with the Vedanta concept of all in one. How did they acquire all this knowledge thousands of years before the modern world? I mean, Hitler even famously sent expeditions to India in the 30s to seek out their propulsion formulas, including this ancient anti-gravity formula. And again, isn't it
Oh, okay. So the TR3B is the black triangle. It allegedly uses electrogravitonics, which was derived allegedly from Der Glocke, the flying bell, which was supposedly designed after the Vimanas and the Vedic texts. Um, I hope that helps. If not, ask questions, please.
interesting how all these things started coming out after World War II? Rockets, teleportation, time devices, cloning, and all after bringing the Nazi scientists over here with Project Paperclip. What did they find in India? And wouldn't you know it, Prajapati, known in Hindu lore as the great creator deity of the Vedic period of ancient India, is represented by the constellation Orion. Another interesting connection with Orion is that the pyramids at Teotihuacan in Mexico, which are 2,000 years old, align perfectly with Orion's belt and are named the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, again with the occult references, like Osiris and Isis earlier. And furthermore, the pyramids at Giza all
Occult just means hidden. So occult knowledge is hidden knowledge, which is why I don't use the paywall on anything.
also line up perfectly with Orion's belt. Not only that, but the Great Pyramid just so happens to be built on the latitude line 29.9792458, aka the speed of light. The speed of light, as I will go over in a minute, being one of the most crucial components to time travel. Bringing me to the next part of this video. Is time travel plausible? The first piece of evidence I'll present is an easy one that involves an electron. Now, when an electron gets excited, it will emit a specific amount of quantum energy, which in turn will jump the electron from one fixed orbit to another, without ever occupying the space in between. Now, this is known as a quantum leap. So theoretically, one could argue that wormholes do potentially exist at the subatomic level. This electron moved from point.
I don't understand quantum physics enough to debunk him, but I have looked into these things deeply enough to recognize how the people that embrace this ideology draw their parallels of quantum mechanics to the Torah, um, especially if you look at it through the lens of the Book of Enoch. It's just so wild.
Point A to point C without touching point B. But what about on our scale? Einstein's theory of special relativity states that the closer someone's speed gets to the speed of light, the slower time moves around him. Now, this concept is called time dilation and has been repeatedly proven by comparing atomic clocks aboard GPS satellites, timepieces aboard the International Space Station, and amongst many other methods. So technically, time travel into the future is actually possible and proven. Now, in this theory is also the famous energy equals mass times the speed of light in a vacuum. Now, the speed of light is measured in a vacuum because only in a vacuum do all wavelengths of light travel at the same speed. Now, normally the spectrum spans from blue, the slower side, to red, the faster side. But I think
See, this is where I've really started questioning things because the the speed of white light is constant, but then you start breaking it up into the spectrum, and of course the light is going to travel the different parts of the spectrum of light is, and then he's just talking about the visible spectrum. He's not even getting off into the broader electromagnetic scale there, but he just contradicted himself, and that it was that sort of thing that really started getting me to questioning. Wait, I mean, a lot of this stuff is crazy, and these people keep reaching for like some really wild stuff to try to. This is what I call mental parkour. This is not mental gymnastics. They're not just jumping through hoops. This is what I call mental parkour.
this is an important distinction because at one point Andrew Basiago describes the light field as being blue and white. Now,
Okay, so there's the drawing that I was referencing earlier. We've got two Tesla coils, and then they've added this panel in there in between, like these two Tesla coils. And I'm sure you've probably seen YouTube videos of two or more Tesla coils playing music, or the guy that wears the mesh suit and at least used to do lightning tricks standing between two Tesla coils. And so that's where I started trying to debunk this stuff. And of course, true believers aren't going to believe the truth.
now didn't QX the significance of the colors blue and white? Is this why they use them? But ultimately,
And he keeps asking me these questions because everything in their world is coded.
according to the theory of special relativity, if you were to somehow travel close to the speed of light for an extended period of time, you could say travel a year, then come back to Earth, and 500 years would have passed, essentially traveling to the future. Now, the faster light waves are red. The faster you go, the further you go into the future. Does that mean that blue energy field with slower particles would send you into the past? Or is that just what everything looks like around you since you're moving so fast? Or is there even another possible way? Because going into the future is one thing, but even if you did, how could you get back? Isn't the past the past? If you're going according to the space-time continuum, space and time are relative. So shouldn't we be able to theoretically traverse about them all equally? Think about it like this. Left of me and right of me currently are existing simultaneously. Up and down exist simultaneously. In and out exist simultaneously. Does that mean the past, present, and future all also exist simultaneously? And if you are able to travel at high speeds, propelling yourself into the future, shouldn't you be able to also go back into the past? Well, this brings us to string theory. Now, string theory is loved by some physicists and hated by others. Very polarizing. But to start off, I'll explain in the simplest of terms. In an atom, you have particles called electrons, which we just went over, and they orbit the nucleus. The nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons are made up of particles called quarks. And string theory takes this one step further, postulating that at the very core of every particle is a strand of vibrating energy. Now, string theory at its core is an attempt to solve the main conflict between Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. Now, the problem is that the graviton doesn't work with the other three forces. Altogether, you have four forces, which are strong, weak, electromagnetic, and gravity. Each force is carried by a boson. Strong forces are carried by bosons named gluons. And as you guessed it, they're used to glue the quarks together and glue the protons and neutrons together.
That it's not just a clever name.
Electromagnetic forces are carried by photons. Weak forces are carried by W and Z. And gravity is carried by the graviton, which is by far the weakest of all forces. So string theory is an attempt to unify gravity with the other three forces. Now, one of the things they ran into when they were working this theory out was the creation of a new theoretical particle called the tachyon, which traveled faster than the speed of light, and on paper anyway, back in time. Now, this is obviously what is used to discredit string theory, but is it possible that the math isn't wrong after all? I mean, maybe. Could this be what they're really testing at CERN? That's an awful lot of money to look at some bosons. Is CERN an attempt to open some sort of looking glass technology on a grand scale? We already know they're into the occult and possibly trying to summon entities or whatever this clip is.
Yeah, and Candace showed that in that other clip. It was in a compilation. This is a common go-to because this is a large statue of Vishnu dancing as Agni. Vishnu and Agni both being Hindu deities, Agni being a fire deity. And these people come out and do some sort of ritual. I don't know what it is. So to me, it's a cult because the purpose and intent behind their actions are hidden to me. I don't know what's going on. But that said, it's weird, in my opinion. It's really weird. They're they may be trying to work some magic. I don't know. But those who don't know are going to jump to conclusions so that they can validate whatever it is they're trying to transmit.
They be tapping into ways of traveling not just through time but into other dimensions. Now, if you take string theory further, you get superstring theory, which part of it states that at each nexus of space-time there are another 6 dimensions, which at its onset seems like an odd claim. Wouldn't we be able to interpret these other dimensions? But not necessarily. Now, when you consider the way sight works, we're not actually seeing things. Rather, we're seeing the light reflecting off said object. Now consider this. The human eye is so incredibly limited in its range, we can only see less than 1%, a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now back to string theory. If you work it out to its final inception, you get M theory, where altogether you have 11 dimensions. Could these extra 7 dimensions account for planes of reality coexisting with our own that we can't even see? Is this how these summonses that John Dee and Queen Elizabeth I tapped into work? Right? So
Boy, that was a random jump, wasn't it?
they say they had found specific sequences of sound in this ancient literature that was stored in the Vatican. The Vatican, by the way, which has miles of ancient literature in its vaults and no one's allowed to see. Sometimes I wonder if this was the real reason that the library at Alexandria was burnt down, to hide this ancient knowledge from the masses. But there's
Okay, so where he's leaning there with the music stuff, the sound and healing, is leaning more towards the Rosicrucian teachings. Uh, I, I've done a video about them. I'll try to remember to drop the link.
seems to be something to sound frequency and melody. Maybe this is why the American Standards Association changed the standard A from 432 hertz to 440 hertz in 1926. Now, Basiago had said that Fermi was experimenting with the frequencies when he made his breakthrough. Burrish talks to them doing the slight changes in frequency to get different results with this equipment. Could they have changed the standard frequency to 440 to keep us away from ones that we could possibly use? And much like adding the fluoride in the water to calcify the pineal gland,
And that's why Alex Jones sells that what is it, iodine sourced from deep sea kelp or something. It's away from the pollution. Like pollution doesn't settle in the water. I don't know.
many believe that the original norm, 432, is a frequency more in tune with nature, and that 440 causes more anxiousness. And if we are all vibrating strands of energy at the subatomic level of every atom, could all reality, including ourselves, be susceptible to certain frequencies and melodies, if you will? One potential argument for this is the solfeggio scale, which many claim to be healing frequencies. And of course, a lot of that's subjective, and it's really impossible to test. But we do know of observable changes that have been documented in plants. Here's a study that states that when they applied certain frequencies to these plants, they could significantly promote the division and cell wall fluidity of callus cells, and also significantly enhance the activity of protective enzymes and endogenous hormones. It goes on to talk about all the different ways they were able to change these things and what results they got from which vegetables with different frequencies. So, the idea that we at the most subatomic level are made up of energy isn't really that far-fetched. And to take that one step further, the idea of projecting our conscience out of our mind isn't that far-fetched either. Our brain is the most intense supercomputer in known creation. I mean, it's not even close. All of our thoughts are waves of energy. Our brain has 5 different frequencies of brain waves running from high to low. It transmits waves of
Are you exhausted yet? All this bouncing around and leaping around and this is how these things work. These bigger conspiracy theories that are hidden, that the general people, that the normies, that the normies don't know about. This is that secret knowledge that makes this group of individuals elite because they have the understanding. But do they? I mean, it's a lot of speculation and question asking and that whole I'm just asking questions, bro. It does not allow for anybody to like actually work through something. Um, like I said, I don't know enough about physics to be able to wade in on any of that. So maybe somebody can drop something, or maybe some people can drop some information in the comments. I'd be interested to learn more. But yeah, that there are brainwaves, but they're oh my goodness.
energy all day long. It's a transmitter and a receiver of energy. Now consider how the Bluetooth in your phone works. Your phone, which isn't a millionth as powerful as your brain, it transmits low frequency waves of energy to your stereo, which is a receiver. It's essentially the same technology. Only ours is far advanced. I mean, if a phone can do it, surely our brain can. And if phones are set to Bluetooth, they're also capable of reading low frequency waves. Now, who's saying it's only picking up the ones that are being sent out by our electronics? It's just something to think about. But if a phone can send out complex information without it getting jumbled using the exact thing that we use for every thought in our brain all day long, then who's saying we can't send our consciousness out without being jumbled? I mean, with the help of a medium, of course. But now I'm starting to get a little off track. So what does all this mean? I think the discovery of how to harness electricity changed everything. Edison gets most of the credit, obviously, due to his DC current, but it was really Tesla's discovery of AC current, what we use today, which changed the world. I mean, everything is energy. Once they knew how to harness it, I believe that opened up the potential to unlock everything in this world. And it seems that in the decades following, different physicists began to figure out how to manipulate it, whether it be from reverse engineering devices they found, procuring ancient writings, or simply working out the formulas from scratch. In the case of the man who discovered AC current and opened the floodgates himself, Nikola Tesla. The man who was obsessed with manipulating energy and was even working at transmitting energy for free through the air when he died. Now, it seems that from these newly discovered breakthroughs came three types of devices: the Montauk chair, a teleporter, and a looking glass. Now, the looking glass appears to be showing them probable future timelines and or events. I think Q Team is telling us, and telling the Black Hats, that they have one. I mean, it's mentioned right here in post 9, single digits. I mean, Q's been telling us constantly that we have more than we know. Reread the drops, expand your thinking. And I'll admit, I would read some of them sometimes, like, how much more can there be? I mean, I feel like we've been over these pretty thoroughly, but maybe it's been right in front of us the whole time. I mean, with the constant future proofs, past, timelines, change, boom, boom. I mean, they said these machines work in tandem, right? That would mean 4 booms. The constant Alice in Wonderland references. And who did he say was Alice? Hillary. Who saved Edison's lab where they had time breakthroughs with Tesla's technology? Hillary. Who did the Looking Glass tell our intel agencies would be our future president? Hillary. Who was oddly confident the entire election. So confident that she didn't even have that many rallies or a concession speech written. Hillary. Who were the papers and websites so sure we're going to win despite huge crowds for Trump every single night by 99%? Hillary. They never thought she would lose. They had no contingency plan.
At least I will go down as a president.
All this is why, to me, this is one of the most exciting posts that Q has ever dropped. And what did Q Plus post 1 hour and 7 minutes before this drop? Reverse engineer. And there are those numbers again. 1 and 7 that keep popping up. And what happened 1 hour and 7 minutes after Trump posted reverse engineer? Q posted about Project Looking Glass, which was a device reverse engineered from the cylinder seals and a yellow cube. And who did the elite worship? Amongst others, the black cube from the cult of Saturn. Saturn is the god of time. Now, who was said to have a looking glass? DARPA. Who made Facebook, originally known as Project LifeLog, as a way to gather data on nearly every citizen worldwide?
Fact.
DARPA. Could this info have been being collected to strengthen the accuracy of one of these devices? Or what about just the other day when someone found a 4 terabyte trove of sensitive data belonging to over 1 billion people, a seventh of the world's population, found on an unsecured Google Cloud server? How valuable would that information be to someone with one of these devices? Or everything else being used? I mean, the possibility of being able to move about time changes everything. And really, on the simplest of levels, the concept of stretching time is actually quite common. I mean, all the time there'd be days where it seems like you blink and 5 minutes go by. And then there's days where every minute seems like an hour. I mean, sometimes we'll fall asleep and have a full dream that seems to go on, and when you wake up, only 10 minutes has passed. It's possible that we don't fully understand time as much as we think we do. And I think it's important to remember that up until 150 years ago, we didn't understand any of this. In the grand scheme of time, this is brand new. And look at the Mandela effect. This is something that I've never been able to make sense of until maybe now. I mean, if they were in fact moving about the timeline to past events, it would undoubtedly be altering things, albeit slightly. But still, how do you explain these books from the late 1800s, which Wikipedia describes as being inspired by Alice in Wonderland? That's right. The Barron Trump books are inspired by Alice in Wonderland. You have Alice in Wonderland was inspired by Alice Little. Now here's a clip of Trump from right after Q posted Project Looking Glass where he says three things. First, he says little Adam Schiff and then emphasizes the number 9, says it twice, and then pauses. Post number 9 mentions a looking glass, and then right after that he says,
I want to draw a correlation here over to the New Apostolic Reformation and the NAR prophets. These people are always looking for signs and wonders. They're always looking for a code somewhere, some sort of clue that everything is going their way, some sort of positive confirmation. Um, I know there's a technical word for it. It's escaping my mind right now.
boom, this tech seems to work with booms. And if you take this one step further, what follows the White Rabbit? His pocket watch. Here's a pocket watch from 1944, the year after Trump's uncle went over Tesla's papers, that's called the Ingersoll Trump. Ingersoll just so happens to be the name of the author who wrote the Baron Trump novels, which are, quote, a response to Alice in Wonderland. And then The Last President, which almost identically parallels Trump's current presidency. You have unexplainable video like this old Charlie Chaplin clip from the 20s where this lady looks like she's talking on a cell phone. You have this video from the 30s where this factory worker looks like she's talking on a cell phone. You have this ancient Greek carving that looks like a laptop with USB ports. You have ancient Egyptian carvings that look like helicopters and UFOs. You have 1,000 future proofs past. That's some that go the exact minute. I mean, if Q is in fact telling us that they're in possession of at least a looking glass device validating this technology, then that to me is one of the most exciting revelations of all time. And it's been 80 years since Roswell. I mean, it would almost be unbelievable if we hadn't reverse engineered some of this tech by now. And I also believe for that reason that a good 90% of modern UFO sightings are crafts that were created right here on planet Earth. And just look at World War II where pilots were reporting.
And let's see, it's the very end of February. It's 27th of February, 2026. And right now, Trump just recently told Secretary of Defense, aka Secretary of War, I guess, Pete Hegseth to uh, release the files on the UFOs, not Epstein.
Flying objects that they called Foo Fighters. Here, let's look them up. Oh, can't do that. Let's look up the goddess Isis. Oh, can't do that.
You'll notice he's only looking at the top results.
Hey, let's look up Asoka, the Hindu emperor who commissioned the books which contained the info on how to build the Vimana, which the Nazis went there in the first place. Up, can't do that. This is how they bury information. They used to do it by slowly changing the history books. Now they also use the internet. Want to know about Rick Ross, who was working with the CIA in the 80s to help spread cocaine? Sorry. Here's a rapper for you. Or what about one of the pioneers of this technology, Tesla? You can now pick from one of our many models. Sure, we know some of these things still, but what will they look like in 100 years? Some we barely know now. The first Foo Fighters sightings occurred in November of 1944, when pilots flying over Western Europe by night reported seeing fast-moving, round-glowing objects following their aircraft. The objects were variously described as fiery and glowing red, white, and orange. Some pilots described them as resembling Christmas tree lights and reported that they seemed to toy with the aircraft, making wild turns before simply vanishing. These are real confirmed sightings from the end of World War II. When you look up Foo Fighters, you get a band. Or when you mention UFOs, you're laughed and scoffed at. I mean, Christopher Columbus literally wrote about observing a light glimmering at a distance that vanished and reappeared several times during the night, moving up and down in sudden and passing gleams. Then hours later, when they reached land, the inhabitants eagerly came to him and asked if they were the people from the heavens. Had they just seen these same lights? And these sightings had occurred at the same
I don't know that any of that ever happened.
time Christopher Columbus was sailing over the Bermuda Triangle, documented in his journal. Or what about April 14th, 1561, where there's literal documentation of the people of Nuremberg describing an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object and then a large crash outside the city. The newspaper, which still exists to this day, claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. The newspaper describes the objects of various shapes, including crosses, globes, 2 lunar crescents, a black sphere, and tubular objects, from where several smaller round objects emerged and darted out around the sky at dawn. In an official newspaper,
I was sure about that. Did you go through all the time to do the research and translation on those documents? I have my doubts.
from 1561 Germany. And then 5 years later in Switzerland, it happened again. So this technology exists, and it has existed for a long, long time. And this is the next horizon for us. You had the Industrial Revolution, then you had the Scientific Revolution, then the Digital Revolution, and now the Space-Time Revolution. My overall decode is that I believe Alice in Wonderland is code for someone using this equipment, with Alice going down the rabbit hole being an allegory to the using of an Einstein-Rosen bridge to traverse time. I think these two posts are telling me that the Q team has one and are using it. I believe that they're also telling us that Hillary was using one in Saudi Arabia, and that access to these devices are being shut down. Even CERN was curiously shut down December 2018 with a reopening date of early 2021, right after the election of what undoubtedly they hope is a new president. What do we know about the military in general? They're always 50 years ahead of public disclosure. To be honest, that's probably a safe estimate. I think it's possible that aside from access to a looking glass, they also have access to this entire floor, allowing them to physically move about probable futures and past events as well as view them. I think it's possible that some of the president's early trips around the world, like for example this Saudi Arabia trip that these trips started around, were about commandeering the different components to these devices. I also believe it's possible that this sort of tech has been in the possession of the Trump family for many years, stemming from the president's Uncle John, and now are getting to combine it with years of reverse engineered advances achieved by our government working with similar recovered and gifted ET tech. That's what I'm coming away with after looking into this. Now, will all this ever fully be disclosed? Who knows? I doubt it. So, there's no way to ever know this for 100% certain. That's why I said at the beginning of the video that this was a chance to suspend disbelief and just let our minds wonder, what if? But I'll leave you with this. What did Q say when asked, are we alone? No. Consider the vastness of space. And this is something that really resonated with me when he said that. This is something I have felt my entire life. How anyone could look up at the endless array of stars and think that we're the only ones in the universe with sentient beings inhabiting it is beyond me. 1995, astronomer Bob Williams puts together a team and aims the Hubble telescope at an empty patch of space by the Big Dipper's handle for 100 straight hours. What they discovered was staggering. The Hubble telescope didn't just capture stars in this blank area of space, it captured full galaxies, thousands of them in one.
And that's what drove mankind to develop the James Webb telescope, to be able to get a better view of the deep space field.
Tiny, seemingly blank area of space. I believe personally that there are many civilizations among the stars, and thanks to one of them, we now own a looking glass. Where we go one, we go all.
Our nation of pioneers still yearns to conquer the unknown. Because we are Americans and the future belongs totally to us. Once more we will launch intrepid souls blazing through the sky and soaring into the heavens. Once more we will summon the American spirit to tame the next great American frontier. When it comes to space, too often, for too many years, our dreams of exploration and discovery were really squandered by politics and bureaucracy, and we knocked that out. It will be even more incredible, far more incredible, because we are giving you a platform the likes of which nobody has ever been given before. Together, there is absolutely nothing Americans can't do. When we get together, there's nobody even close. Now we are ready to begin the next great chapter of American space exploration.
So that WWG1 WGA, where we go one, we go all, that's the Q battle cry. And in that last clip, man, I'll tell you what, Trump has changed a lot, a lot. I knew, but anyway, that was his announcement leading up to the creation of Space Force, which uh, I mentioned it before. I was stationed with the Air Force Weapons Lab at Kirtland Air Force Base. We were part of Systems Command. Our sister command was Materials Command. Systems Command and Material Command um, combined, and oh shoot, I forget. I think it became Materials Command, and then it ended up evolving into into Space Command, which brought in members of other branches of the military, and then Space Command gave birth to Space Force. And I can link over to Kat Kerr with that and her Spirit Force thing, but not today. And I did a video on her already. But this has been a confessional entry, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you stuck to the end, do me a favor and at least drop a blue heart in the comments. Give me a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would enjoy that. I'd appreciate it. And share this information with anybody that you think might could use it. So until the next video, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Try to get the rest that you really need and keep track of those fluids.